Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stories of Search with me, Rachel Weinhold.
And me, Erin Dempsey.
Good morning, Erin. How are you?
Good morning. I'm okay. How are you?
I'm alright. I'm excited.
Are you? What
Well, because this is your episode for starters.
It is indeed.
But also, it's a bit of a special time of year.
It is the most amazing time of year. It is my happy birthday tomorrow when we're filming. So instead of a brew, we've got some cocktails.
We've got cocktails. Marks, what have you got?
I've got a mojito.
Right, okay.
Should we do ASMR?
Yeah, ready.
Oh yeah, baby.
Sure, peppers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Right.
It is
That's enough of that now.
wow, it is worth noting that it's also about 10 a.m.
Yes.
time of our recording, so
It is.
but there's no rules when it's your birthday, so
Absolutely not. Morning drinking is allowed when you're on holiday, when it's your birthday, and when it's Christmas. Those are the
yeah,
rules.
alright. Okay. What are they doing rules? Gosh. Okay. So let's just jump straight in.
We shall.
So today we're going to be talking about the environmental impact of search. So last week we spoke about how big the internet is, but a big part of our conversation was where the internet is housed. And I want to dive into how that impacts our world and the environment.
Sounds good.
So let's just get stuck in. I'm going to fire loads of stats at you, like Statman Dave, and we'll just go from there and have a chat about it. So,
Perfect.
to start off the episode, I'm going to just make a little disclaimer that most of the research and most of what I'm going to be talking about is picking on Google. Now, I know that Google's not the only search engine out there, and not the only, it's just a small part of the massive internet. However, the stats that are around Google alone are massive. So you can imagine what it's like for the rest of it as well.
And Google has it's always sort of sat at around a 90% share of the market. I think it's slightly less now because things sort of come in as a player, but they're still there in the sort of mid-90s.
Yeah, they're the big boys.
Yeah,
for sure.
and when we're trading and I'm talking to people, Google is shorthand, isn't it? When I'll say Google when I mean search engines.
Yeah. So, disclaimer, I'm going to say Google, but I mean search engines. So, one Google search has the same environmental impact as 1 metre driven in an average car.
Wow.
Let that sink in.
Yeah.
To make that even bigger, I'm going to be talking numbers that are like beyond our brains. So there are 99,000 search queries per second on Google, and that's just Google. So if it's 1 metre, do the maths, that's like 99,000 metres per second in a car. Like, if we can think about the environmental impacts, it's easier to think about the environmental impacts of a car than it is for search. So we have around 2 trillion global searches every year.
Wow.
So think of the environmental impact of just the search alone. I'm not even
a car driving 2 trillion miles.
Yeah.
I wonder how many times around the earth that is. Too much maths.
Yeah. I've got a drama degree, okay?
I do words, not words.
It's bloody lot,
It's
right?
a lot.
So, and it's easier for us to kind of think about it when we think about the carbon emissions of a car. That's easier for us to get our head around because that's something that we know and we can see. I'm not even talking about like the servers or the data centers yet. That is just what one Google search does to our environment. And think about how many of those searches are just unnecessary.
This is it, yeah. So many of them, and especially since the rise of voice search, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, so tell me if I am. But yeah, since the rise of voice search, I think about like how Leon, my son, uses his Alexa, talks to his Alexa.
Yeah.
He asks her Alexa set a timer. Alexa, what time is it? Alexa, put this tune on. Alexa, tell mum to put a pizza in the oven for me. Just constantly talking to her. So because it's so easy and it's so seamless.
Yeah.
And so every single one of those has got a real world carbon footprint.
I felt really guilty doing the research for this. I was searching and then it was telling me how what I was doing to the environment whilst I was doing these searches.
Yeah.
I think about things, so I'll give you an example. So my go-to dish, something that I'm shit hot at in the kitchen, is an Alfredo pasta. I make it all the time. I know how to make it, I know the ingredients, I know what it's good. But the other day I was like, let me just search it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to search how to make a chicken Alfredo because I just want to see how Gordon Ramsay does it, or
Yeah.
I don't need to do that. It was an unnecessary search, and it wasn't just one search either. Like, I'm constantly, and I know I'm not the only one, I'm constantly guilty of just searching for the sake of searching.
I did exactly the same thing the other day. I was making a potato, asparagus, and pea salad, right? 3 ingredients. I had those ingredients, and I know how to make a dressing. And I did exactly the same thing. I Googled it, and I looked through several recipes, again, just to see, like, oh, I wonder how anyone else does it. I wonder what they put in it. And in the end, I made it the way I've always made it, and really simple.
Exactly.
It was completely pointless.
Yeah. Do you ever, as well, I always do this, I'm really like digging myself a hole here, but do you ever look at something on your laptop, maybe you're on Facebook on your laptop, or you're searching something on Google, and then think, oh, I want to look at the little internet instead, and I do exactly the same search on my phone, or I ask Alexa exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just unnecessary, and we all do it. It's not like, I'm not telling anybody off for doing it, I do it all the time, but if we just go back to like the carbon emissions from every single search, how many of those searches? There are 2 trillion searches every year.
Yeah.
Like, that is a number that we can't even get our heads around.
And do you know what as well? It's something that we completely miss. We're completely blind to it as a society. So, Road Traffic is trying to be, and pretty much is, a carbon neutral business. And the way that we do that is because we know that we use servers and all this stuff. So we offset that by planting trees, and we've planted about 600 trees in the last kind of few years, along with some other sort of carbon offsetting stuff. That we've never even thought about taking into account the number of searches we do into that. We're basing that on, as I say, servers and data centres and mileage, things like that, but never even considered factoring in, how many searches are each of us doing every day and carbon offsetting that at all.
And it's because it's hard to put your finger on, like in last month's episode when we were talking about the internet just being this thing that's above us. It's really hard to kind of quantify, like, the effect of what search is having. I can see the carbon emissions that a car's creating, or if I was to look at a data centre and how much we have to cool those things, which I'll come to in a minute, we can kind of see that. But when the internet is something that we feel is beyond us, it's hard to kind of put a finger on the effect that it's having on our very real.
Well, it's back to that thing, which what we were saying last time, isn't it? That the internet exists in some ethereal place. It's in the cloud. It's in the ether.
Yeah.
It's not a real physical thing. We just don't think of it in that way. We think of it in terms of telephone communications. And
it's out there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's only got worse. So, like you were saying, things like Alexa devices, the other thing that I'm not going to say because our phones will go off, but the other voice search, and AI, right? So that has a massive impact on the environment specifically. So AI language models have massively intensified greenhouse gas emissions. They are consuming crazy amounts of energy, and they require loads of natural resources to work. So just another stat to throw out there. So AI language models, such as ChatGPT or Bard, Gemini is it called now, they account for 3.7% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow.
And that is just the language models. That is just AI that we use, to search. It's another kind of search engine, I suppose. And
well, the next episode that we're doing is actually on that. It's on AI and search.
Stay tuned.
There we go.
And these language models are integrated into search engines, so the computing power that's needed to not only run these models, but to train them. AI only knows what's already out there. So the internet is constantly having to train these models and constantly using all this power to do so. So the AI language models, it increases the energy used of a search by up to 5 times. So if I am doing a search, obviously that's however many meters in a car, but because AI is now integrated into that search and AI is pulling up results, it increases the computing power by 5 times.
So that's 5 miles in a car for every search, as opposed to 1, which is a massive jump.
It's a massive jump.
If we're multiplying that over, what was the number? 99 billion
Something like that.
times 5. We need some mathematicians.
Yeah,
we can't work this out. We can't work this out. But
To our listeners, work it out.
someone use their calculator. That's a phenomenal leap in terms of, and again, we think that we are becoming more efficient, we think that we are becoming more slick. The whole point of developing AI is so that everything becomes more intuitive and it becomes easier to use and all this stuff. But just by default, and again, they know this, they're quite clever, aren't they? That's how they're doing it. But that means that we use it more and it becomes more integrated. And we were talking last time, weren't we, about how integrated it is. We're using Google Maps when we're going somewhere, even if we know the journey. We're doing research on things, even if we know what the answer is, just because it's, fills a bit of time, or we're nosy, or we want to check, or whatever reason. But the more seamless and streamlined it becomes, the more the environmental impact of it is.
My question is, do you think that it'll last forever? So, like AI being integrated into these search engines, for us as like the consumer side, we're still at a relatively early stage of AI taking over search engines, being integrated, however you want to word it. And right now it's using all this computing power to train them. Do you think that's going to last forever? Or do you think there will become a point where they're just trained and that is just part of the search engine?
I mean, this is a question that we're actually going to sort of look at a bit more detail in the next episode. But I mean, computing does always become more efficient. If we think about what computers were like in the 50s, they were huge. And again, the amount of energy used to, power those was immense. And that's become more streamlined. So yes, in theory, they should become more streamlined. But by the other point, they will always be developing. And these AI models are learning models. So they're not programmed and done. They are always going to be developing.
Yeah.
So they will be evolving. But I think as a society, we are going to have to reckon with this at some point. We cannot continue to consume the Earth's resources in the way that we have been. So in the way that we're turning cars electric and starting to, think about that, which we should have done 30 years ago. I think we are going to have to start recognising that this is what's happening and start doing something about it. And to be fair, there are signs that Google is starting to reckon with that, probably from a cost more than an environmental point of view. That's again another argument. But no, I think theoretically it could continue, but I think we as humanity are going to have to draw a line somewhere and say we've got to make this more energy efficient.
Yeah. So bringing it back to humanity, another stat to throw in there is that one Google search or one search on a search engine generates the same carbon emissions as our body does when we are thinking for 75 seconds.
Right.
Now, 75 seconds, right, it doesn't sound like that much. Imagine if we were just silent for 75 seconds thinking now. It's a long time. You can get to a lot of conclusions in 75 seconds.
Well, some people.
Yeah. The way my brain works.
I won't even understand what I'm having for tea at the time.
But 75, so for example, going back to that chicken Alfredo recipe, if I just thought for 75 seconds, what goes in that Alfredo? I'd have had the recipe, I'd probably have the method. Like, I know it. I just needed to think about it. Now, our bodies, obviously, they produce CO2, but 75 seconds of brain power is just one search. You can do a couple of searches in 75 seconds if it's bish bash bosh. And also think about the impact that that's having on the human brain. We're not thinking of 75 seconds. Instead, we're going to Google and just asking them to think for us. Like, our brains surely aren't being exercised the way they should be.
And again, I mean, this is another episode that we've got planned in the future, is how is search impacting our attention spans and our ability to kind of think for ourselves. So it is a really interesting question that I'm interested in. But I think the other interesting thing about it is, yes, it's so quick and it's so easy, so we just search it. But I don't know about you, but also I think the way that we then consume the information that we found is kind of not worth it. So, for example, if I'm watching a teleprogram I will sit there and I'll see an actor and I'll be like, oh, what have they been doing recently? And I'll search for it and then I'll look at a couple of pictures and I'll go, oh, they got divorced. And then somebody else has come on the telly and I'm like, I know what she's doing now. Oh, she's had some children, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just constantly, so I'm not even like doing a search and then reading something. I don't read a full article. I won't even look through a full, I look at 1, 2, maybe 3 images and then I'm bored and I'm on to the next thing. So it's not, it's like, it's not even worth it when we're doing it.
No.
It's like, back to your recipe, you didn't really then use that. You went back to the tried and trusted recipe that you know.
Yeah. You just hit the nail on the head with watching telly and Googling. So most of this episode I've been talking about search, but the internet isn't just search. So we have, like we were in the office earlier and I've got Spotify running in the background. You're watching telly and searching. Me and you can be sat next to each other and we're both watching TikTok and we'll be sending it to each other instead of being like, oh, how funny is this? WhatsApping constantly. Like those short, unnecessary exchanges with the internet is what's accounting for all of this combination. So
it's back to laziness again. I mean, we in my house, I've got a husband and 2, well, actually not a teenager, but two boys. We live in a reasonably sized house, admittedly, but even so, like we will each be in our bit of the house and we'll just text on the family WhatsApp. Yeah. There's no like shouting on what, God forbid, get up and go upstairs and ask them a question or tell them that their tea's ready. Yeah. It's just messaging constantly.
And all that data that's pinging into your house constantly. Yeah. You don't have to do a Google search to be having that data come through. You're watching the telly, you're talking to each other online.
And so, again, it's something we're aware of. If think about it, how we context that. All of our appliances come with energy efficiency ratings now. We've just bought new windows for the house. We asked the question, how energy efficient are they? We wouldn't buy a fridge if it wasn't energy efficient A star or whatever. Everything we're considering now. It's part of our lexicon to think about the environmental impact of things in our home. But that
just WhatsApp,
the devices whose name we shall not say, we'd never consider those as part of that.
And I wonder when we will. I wonder when,
maybe when the Internet of Things becomes a little bit more, and all of our appliances are then run through our internet. But again, maybe not, because we still see the internet even after 30 years as ethereal and magic. So
David Attenborough constantly tells us, landfill and wash your canned beans out, and
when you have a little chat with him.
Yeah. He always tells me anyway. Me and David are tight. But it's always on the consumer. You wash out your tin of beans or you rinse out your bottle of milk before you put it back on the doorstep. You don't want things to go to landfill, blah blah blah. I don't know if we're gonna have. Right now, we can't see the impacts that search is having on the globe and on the environment. And it's a tale as old as time, that it's almost like we need to see the damage before we're like, oh shit, okay, we should do something about that.
Yeah. Oh, I remember I was watching a comedian once and I can never remember his name. And I
he must be funny.
Yeah, he was funny actually. But he was saying he'd just been to America, to the Rust Belt in America. He was like, one thing you notice is how many factories there are just belching out emissions.
Yeah.
It's the heartland of kind of American industry. And he's like, there I am coming home and rinsing out the Marmite pot at some point. It's like, we're kidding ourselves. Yeah, we're kidding ourselves that this is going to make a difference. But I suppose then we go back to, well, every little helps. Yeah. It's better that we do it than don't do it, isn't it? So
what not baffles me, but what interests me, I suppose, is that with environmental impacts, the onus is almost always on the consumer.
Yeah.
And
not
the big boys, Google, have a lot to answer for. How many trees are they bloody planting?
Well, this is it. We could go down a whole political rabbit hole here, but the big corporations are the ones that are lobbying government to not have to adhere to these regulations. But governments have to be seen to be doing something, so they make us sort our recycling and they ask us to do fewer journeys in the car and stuff. But it's absolute fallacy. The world is not going to change until governments and industry change.
Yeah.
But they've got enough money to not.
Yeah, to not. So my big question, how many trees would you say we needed to plant to offset the CO2 emissions of Google? Don't think about everything else. I'm talking about Google now.
Right, well, so grow traffic. We are a small company here in the UK, and we have almost offset our carbon footprint by planting 600 trees,
Right.
which is quite a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Now, like, we're quite a bit smaller than Google.
Just a little bit.
So, I don't know how I would even put a figure on that. I mean, it's got to be billions. It's got to be several Amazon rainforests, surely.
So last year, so 2023, Google generated 10.2 million metric tons of CO2.
Wow.
And we would need to plant 46 trees to offset just 1 ton of CO2.
Yeah.
And they've produced 10.2 million. Again, do the maths for me.
Yeah.
But so 46 trees per 1 ton of CO2, and they are producing tens of millions of CO2 each year.
And you know, by the same token, there's whole issues around carbon capture. There was a really good documentary on, it might have been the iPlayer, it might have been Panorama, recently about issues with carbon offsetting. But we've got a twofold problem in that we are, first of all, not planting enough trees. Secondly, chopping trees down to build data centres and clear space and land and stuff for this. But also, we've then got these carbon offsetting programs that corporations are paying for greenwashing, essentially. And these carbon capture companies are not doing what they say they're going to do. They're not planting enough trees, or they haven't got enough land, or they're not doing enough. They're selling they call them carbon credits. They're selling them more than once. So again, you know, companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, etc., will say, but we're carbon offsetting. You know, we're paying all of these companies to do this. That is not enough. And at the same time, we're still chopping down trees that we should be keeping.
And that is just search. Not only just search, that's just Google. So like I was saying earlier, you know, all the data that's producing these carbon emissions, watching your telly, whilst going on TikTok, whilst your husband's Googling next to you. A big thing that I was shocked by is sending emails. So short, unnecessary emails, you know those, thanks, noted, best wishes, yada yada yada. They contribute as much carbon dioxide each year as 3,334 diesel cars. So if everyone was to just send a few less nice emails, that would be the same as taking that amount of cars off the road. And again, we can see it clearer when we put it into perspective of cars, because we can see all the fumes that are coming out the backside of a car, and we know that they're not great. But just those short, unnecessary emails, I'm going to hold my hands up here. I emailed Rebecca, our colleague, the other day, T-A. And I sent it and then thought, that's a diesel car.
I do it all the time, and I must admit I'm trying to not, because I did know there was an environmental impact to it. So, and also there's a time implication to it. You know, why I don't want my inbox filling up with emails that are just people going, thank you, or you're welcome. I'm like, so why I stop it? But then you do worry that is someone going to think I'm being rude? And it is really hard, because we've got so many methods of communication now. I saw a really funny TikTok the other day, and it was this lad, and he was like, I'm really sorry if I haven't answered your message yet. I'm really understaffed over here. There's just me. And I was like, yeah, that's what it feels like. You know, it is abnormal that we are this contactable in this modern age. But if you think you've got messages coming in from your WhatsApp and your email and your Messenger and your Instagram, you know, all of these different places, and you are trying to not be rude to people, so you're trying to, you know, answer them and say thank you, but you know, I appreciate it, that they're sending a love heart, whatever it might be. But it's getting out of control. It's getting out of control from a psychological point of view. It's clearly out of control from an environmental point of view. You know, it's just crackers. Why are we doing it?
I'm wondering if and again, it's like, this has to be a big movement, so everyone join me on this. You know, if we see all these messages all the time, we're trying to do our bit for the environment, please don't print this email. If we had something that said, we're trying to save the environment, please don't reply.
Please don't reply, because like, who's printing emails? It's like leaving your phone on noise now, isn't it? You know, like that's a psychotic move. People are printing out emails in this day and age. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, yeah, so we could probably do away with that message now. But yeah, maybe it should be something like, you know, we're trying to save the environment, don't reply unless it's necessary. In fact, I'm going to do that.
Alright, well that's something to come from today's
I am going
podcast.
to do that.
So we touched on last month's episode that the internet, well, search, it's housed, you know, it's here on Earth, and it's housed in these servers, in these data centres, and they are constantly pumping out data, and that is massively impacting our globe. And it's even more significant when we think back to last episode, how much of the internet is dead. So I can't remember the figure, was it 80%?
80%, yeah.
So that is housed somewhere. Nobody's bloody using it.
Yeah.
But the earth is suffering because of it. You know, there's so much of the internet, like it's still data, it's still doing damage.
Yeah.
And no one benefits from it at all. It's actually only a negative.
Yeah.
And these servers are housing all of this data. These servers also have to be cooled down constantly. You know, think of how many monitors are in these buildings. So my next question for you, Rara, is how much water do you think Google uses to cool down their data centers?
Ooh,
and again, I'm only
question.
talking about Google, this
Okay.
corporation.
How are we measuring this? Gallons?
Gallons.
Okay. Per year?
Well,
I mean,
my answer's a day.
Oh, a day. Okay, right. I mean, I'm plucking a figure out of thin air, really. So, you know, I'm thinking, like, how many gallons does it take to flush a toilet? I don't know, 1 million gallons.
All right, chill out.
All right.
Google use 450,000 gallons of water every day just to cool down their data centers.
Wow.
That's the only job that they are using that 450,000 gallons for. So they're using water for other shit.
But I mean, so I think a toilet flush is something like somewhere between 1 to 3 gallons of water, isn't it?
Right.
So if we
I
think,
don't know, how do you know that shit? You'd be great on the pop quiz, because that is shit knowledge.
Well, I might be wrong. All of this stuff is lodged in here somewhere. I try and dredge it out, and it's all got corrupted because it's 80% dead up there. But yeah, I think if we put that into context, again, I don't know exactly how many, but that's an awful lot of toilet flushes, and an awful lot of water wasted. And again, here I am, like, I have a panic attack if I leave the tap on. So when I'm filling up the water buckets for the horses, like if I've left it or I've forgotten and I've left the tap running and the water's overflowing and I go back, I'm so mad. I'm like, look at all that water that I've just wasted.
Yeah.
And it'll be like, a little bit, because I've never left it running for very long. But then there's Google using, again, half the Earth's resources every day.
I'm going to use this on my mother now, so when I get in the shower, I'll put the shower on, and then I'll brush my teeth while the shower's running. The water's heating up.
Yeah.
The water heats up within a second, I don't know how to do it. And my mum bollocks me every time. Mum, I've got nothing on Google.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that.
Do you think I'm bad?
I'm going to
try
try
to
to
do Google.
Yeah. So America is home to the majority of the world's data centers. And the amount of data centers in America is 5,381.
Wow.
2 years ago, it was 3,000-ish.
Wow.
So it has grown thousands since a couple of years ago. The next one down the list is Germany, which has 521, and then the UK has 514.
Right.
So Germany's a lot bigger than us.
Germany's a lot bigger than us.
There's 514 in our country alone.
We do have a lot of data centres, because I don't know if we were on holiday in, maybe it was Mallorca or maybe Greece, so it's completely irrelevant where we were. We were on holiday.
She's just showing off.
Yeah,
She goes to all these countries.
where I go on holiday. Yeah. We were in a horrendous, all-inclusive place that was child-friendly, so nobody think I was in luxury holidays. But yeah, anyway, so we were there, and one of the data centres in London melted.
I remember.
Yeah, because it was when we had that really big heat wave, it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And it did actually shut down a huge proportion of the UK's internet, and I think about 3 of our clients' websites were down, and it took them a while. And data centres have multiple sort of fail-safes, so multiple fail-safes had failed, and were not safe, in order for this data centre to, in inverted commas, melt. But yeah, it was, even one of those things has a massive impact in the network. So, if we think about that in the context of all of these huge data centres, 514 of them all playing a really pivotal role. spread that out across the UK, as
Yeah.
Stormzy would say. You know, it's massive.
Yeah, and then it just makes you think, you know, this 450,000 gallons of water to cool one data center.
Yeah.
America's got over 5,000 of them.
Yeah.
Like, where's that water coming from? And don't say the sea, so I know. But like, that's a lot of water to be cooling these data centers, and more data centers are being built because the internet's evolving, as we know, it's growing at crazy speeds, and they all have to be cooled, or they're all going to melt, like that one in London. However, I will say it isn't all doom and gloom.
Okay.
Each company that has data centers do have obligations to become sustainable. I am going to say another disclaimer that when I was reading these obligations, it's like this political manifesto where I thought, bollocks, that's not going to happen. However, they're trying, okay? So Google, well, it says in writing, Google, all made by Google products, so speakers, blah, 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 that will launch after 2020 are now being built with recycled materials.
Okay.
So that's a little tick.
Yeah.
They all want their, come on Erin, let's rewind. Every grid where they operate, by 2030, they want those grids to be run on carbon-free energy, 24/7. They are generating on-site solar power, and this one made me laugh, okay? They want to replenish 20% more water than they use. So Google is now turning into Jesus, because where are they getting this water from? Okay. So there are some little tick boxes that Google, and again I'm picking on Google, but this is just what I read in their report, they are working towards or aiming towards.
I mean, again, there are huge sort of ethical conversations that we could get into around this, and of course it is good that they are making strides and they are doing positive things to help the environment, of course it is. But even in the sort of infrastructure of those things that they are doing, there are problems within that supply chain. So, you know, they're going to get renewable energy. Well, there are problems in creating true renewable energy, and are they going to get sufficient and all the rest of it? You know, water renewal, it's all very well saying, well, you know, we're going to keep reusing the same water. I think that's what they mean. They play, rather than just keep pumping in fresh water, they're trying to recycle it a little bit.
Yeah.
But still, eventually all that water's got to go into the water system, which is, you know, in this country is an archaic system that is leaking, that is pumping poisonous water into our rivers and all the rest of it. So, you know, there's not one single bit of that. Obviously, you know, supply chains are complex, but at every bit of those, there are real environmental issues. So it's all very well that these companies say, well, we're going to, you know, do this and we're going to do that and blah, blah, but again, we're back to, it needs to be a concerted global effort, because little bits of things happening here and there, whilst it looks good and it's, you know, great greenwashing to put on your website, in reality it's not actually having the benefit that you think it's happening. But everybody else's mind is like, oh well, you know, Google's doing that, but we don't need to worry about climate change because, you know, Google's helping.
Okay, so what can we do then? So to finish off the episode, let's have a look at, again, I don't want to like bring it back to like, well, it's our fault, not just road traffic, but what can we, normal people, and I say that in inverted commas, like what can we do to do our bit, like looking at the findings? So I know like,
rinse out our Marmite pots.
We can rinse out our Marmite pot. Well, I don't eat Marmite because I'm not a serial killer. However, we could rinse them out. I'll rinse out my Heinz beans.
Okay.
We could limit our unnecessary emails. You know, I won't send to all of everyone from now on. We could limit our searches, and I know that that's sometimes hard, but we could be intentional with our searches. You know, I was looking at my search history, which is a dark hole.
It's worrying, isn't it?
However, the amount of questions that I asked Google, so it's my birthday tomorrow, if people didn't already know, and I'm having a party, and I knew what I wanted to wear, right? I knew what I wanted, I knew the style, I knew the colour, but instead I'm Googling garden party dresses, summer dresses. You know, like, just be intentional with your search. You know, if you know what you're after, luckily Google is clever and it kind of gives you what it thinks you're after. But if we can limit those searches and be intentional, it helps. You know, it's one less meter driven in a car, isn't it? So,
it's hard though, isn't it? And I think, you know, this might be a bit of a generational thing again, but the younger generation, like I say, these devices and this way of interacting with the internet is so ingrained. And you think about kind of where that's going to take them in the future. But it is just a sort of ongoing conversation that they're having, and it's the way that they communicate with their friends, and it's the way that they do their homework, and it's in every single aspect of their life. And yes, it's in every single aspect of our lives, but for me, I said this last time, I was in college before I got a mobile phone. I was really before we got a home computer. Certainly before search became something that you could kind of use easily. I was at university by that point. It's perhaps less of a habit for me, or less ingrained for me, but for this young generation,
youths.
Yeah, you young Gen Xers, Gen Zers, aren't you? Which one? Get it, Lani. Lani's not in the background. It's all very well saying, try and be intentional and try and limit it, but I think that's going to be harder than we think it's going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially which is what we'll talk about on the next episode, generative AI becomes a thing, and queries are just answered like that, and comparative query, search is going to become easier and slicker and more intuitive, and so that volume of searches that we're doing, I think, will only increase.
I tried to make it, and
sorry. I will do my best to do my duty to God, to serve the Queen, not the people keep going along. I will do my best to make my searches more intentional and to try and limit them a little bit.
Yeah, we can
put Google down.
All right. There's so much data, that we're housing, especially growth traffic. Like, the amount of emails I get is one little speck of the amount of emails that the company gets. I'm one person in this band, and we can delete that data. We get rid of it. Get rid of those thousands of unread emails, spam. We can do our bit. I know it's a tiny, tiny bit, but we can do our bit in clearing our little section of the globe.
I can get anything between kind of 100 to 300 emails per day, and 50% of those are absolute shite.
Yeah.
It's just spam.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Microsoft Office now has this, focused and unfocused. And literally, I'll just go through the unfocused and delete. I need to unsubscribe from some things. But I would probably say 60% of email communication is absolute nonsense.
100%. 100%. So get rid of it.
So get rid of it, right, fine. I shall have a cleanse.
Have a cleanse, wash out your beans.
Yeah.
No innuendo intended.
Put Google down.
And let's save the earth together.
Yes, okay, fine.
Well, thank you for joining me, Rachel. It's been a lovely chat today.
Yes, thank you. That was very interesting, Erin. Much appreciated.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we will see you next time. So thank you for joining, everybody, and see ya.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
That's a wrap.
That was so good!
How long was that one?
38.
I think
Probably turned out to
yeah.
about 35.
Yeah, 30 minutes I think is kind of the...
That seems like we covered what we needed to cover as well.
It was funny.
It was